Hi there. We're going to learn a method of forecasting called primary directions. And primary directions are very interesting in that they were used very extensively for a very long period of time throughout the Middle Ages by many astrologers. And then they were just kind of dropped. They just sort of fell off a cliff and weren't used very much, and in modern astrology, say in the 60s, 70s, 80s, they were not basically hardly ever used. And then in the last 10 or 20 years, they've gotten revived, and part of the reason they've gotten revived is because astrologers have been digging into the ancient methods and finding out what people did. And a lot of what they did is considerably different from what we have been doing in modern times. So let's look at these primary directions. What are they? Could they be useful? The story behind primary directions is fascinating as well. So we're going to learn a little bit about a specific technique. If you're not interested in primary directions, then this may not be the video for you, but a lot of people are very curious about these ancient methods, and a fairly good number of astrologers, increasing number of astrologers, are claiming that these ancient methods work. Many say they work better than the modern methods. So let's see what they're up to and check this out a little bit. At least find out what they are, the primary directions, and how can I get the information. It's only one part of ancient astrology. I mean, there's all kinds of different things and different periods of astrology. This is just one of them, but it's a big one. So let's start up serious. Let's just start a new list. Let's just start fresh. We've got our data entry screen. Let's do maybe an actor or an actress, just somebody everybody knows. Let's see, is Brad Pitt in here? He is. So I type Pitt. There's Brad Pitt. Does he have a good birth time? Yes, from birth certificate or birth record, AA, which is the highest level actress from a birth record. So he's got a good birth time, so there he is. So most of us knew who Brad Pitt is, so well, let's just use him. As good as anybody else, right? So we've got it. That's all we need right here. So we will click on Done, and there's Brad Pitt's chart wheel. Now, suppose I want to know what's happening with Brad Pitt this year, or the last few years, or the upcoming years. Well, a lot of astrologers, and in different periods of history, and several today, would look at primary directions. So how am I going to get my primary directions? Well, if you watch the first video, you've got an idea of how Sirius and also Kepler work. You've got your blue icons for creating charts, and yellow icons are for outputting, like saving to file and so on. Here's where I get my reports and settings and other things. Well, I can get a report, a listing of primary directions under forecast. I like to use the colored icons here because it's easier for my eye to find things. I could also go up here to the words and click forecast. I get the same exact thing. So it's pretty much redundant. Most of the things you want to do have an icon as well. There are a few specialized, like install or whatever, where we generally use the words. But for for our real work, getting information and entering charts, it's handy to just use the icons for most of us. So I go down here I select forecast, and way down here I see it, primary directions list. There's also Vandam primary directions, which is a variation on primary directions by a modern astrologer. He's alive in the Netherlands, and Wim Vandam, and he is also very educated in celestial mechanics and studied the ancient material, and came up with his variation on how to do primary directions. And with his help and his very kind permission, we were able to add his calculations. Let's go to the earlier form of them. I click on primary directions list, and I get a window of choices. Now, all we know so far is that primary directions are some kind of ancient system for forecasting, at least if you don't have knowledge prior to this class. I heard something back there. I guess not. Sorry. So we got this ancient method, and so what are my choices here? I've got Ptolemies Method, Cardan's method, Naboth's method. So different people evidently have different methods. Placidus, and it tells me if I use Placidus, it takes a long time to calculate. And Kepler. This is me, David Cochran, and a fellow named Roman Kolov came up with the same idea. And so what we can tell here is that there are different ways to calculate primary directions. There's not just one way. So people have come up with different ideas on how to do it. Now, by the way, in regards to the one that I made, I had contacted this astrologer, Roman Kolov, about primary directions. I told him an idea I had. He said, oh, yeah, I've had the same idea. So I put that idea in here and credited both of us. Now, Roman Kolov is one of, perhaps the greatest expert in primary directions today. He went into the ancient material. He found out exactly how they calculated these things. He had to read ancient languages and so on. He also programmed it. He has his own software for doing these things. And he wrote some books where he clearly explains how to do the calculations. If you understand enough about celestial mechanics and spherical trigonometry to decipher it, he explains it straightforward and made it possible for us to put it in the program. So as I've mentioned in the first video, if you watch that on introducing the Sirius software, this software is the result of the collaboration of huge numbers of people. And Roman Kolov did not directly, say, gee, I'll help you with Sirius, but what he did is figured out all this stuff and made it available to anyone to understand how to do the calculations. And it's not something anybody could figure out unless they're willing to develop many, many years of specialized study. So he did that and made it available. So, and consequently, we were able to program a lot of this very easily. Now, so what happens here? Let's click on the first one, Ptolemies Method. So Ptolemy had some kind of idea of how to do these, and I could just click OK and see what I'll get, but I notice here I've got some buttons to check, and one of them has a little blue star-looking thing. Why does it have a little blue star next to it? Right? To catch your attention, because it's really something you might want to, especially might want to click on, and so it's settings. So I'll click on this, primary direction settings, and I can see that I've got different things that I can do. I have evidently two different ways to calculate. Do I want intermediate cusps? I'm going to say no for now to keep this simple. Do I want planets, conjunct planets? I'm going to just say no to that. Do I want to include these extra points? No. Well, now this is helpful. I get an explanation of what some of this means right here. So that's fantastic, because if you don't know what primary directions are, it's nice to be able to go in, select things, and get some information. So for example, latitude of planets. Should I use latitude, or should I set latitude to 0? How would I know? It's my first time to use primary directions. I could Google around, I could go into the help in Sirius, but very handy without even having to look around. I've got it right here, and it tells me, I'll just read it. Using the latitude of the planets is the most commonly used setting, and it makes sense because the planets do have latitude. Alright, cool, I'll use latitude. And then it says, nevertheless, some astrologers calculate primary directions with the latitude of all planets set equal to 0. So most astrologers who use primary directions and claim to have some expertise use latitude, so let's just follow them. Since we don't have any criteria at this point for deciding, we'll just go with the experts, go with the crowd. So I've said all these things no, because I want to get just the basics for now. I'll click OK, and I'll click OK. See what I get. What is it? No, just a listing. Very simple. Nothing very fancy. It's just a chronological list of dates. No graphs, nothing fancy going on here. So it's pretty easy to figure out. Around 2013, which is when I'm making this video, nothing going on. But in 2011, a Neptune conjunct midheaven for Brad Pitt. It's got this thing, 47.62 degrees. That's a technical detail telling us something technical about how the calculation was done. I'll explain a little bit about that later. But what we do know, without having to know any of the technical details of even what a primary direction is, how it's calculated, is it's some forecasting method used in ancient times. And according to this, and using the calculation of, who is it, Ptolemy, Brad Pitt would have a Neptune midheaven in the summer of 2011. So even if you're a beginner in astrology, you know Neptune is idealistic, sometimes prone to disillusion. Midheaven is, related to career, things like that. So you have some kind of idealistic change or maybe a disillusionment related to career in the summer of 2011. In late 2009, because this can vary a few months, the event doesn't necessarily happen on that exact date, but November, December, January 2009, 2010, Venus on the Ascendant. These should be clear, striking events and changes in his life, according to the theory. So some kind of romance and beauty comes into his life then. So it should be fairly easy, I might imagine, to check this out. But nevertheless, there are different theories on how to calculate it. So let's right-click, which, as you know, in Sirius is the fast way to bring up your selections and settings. And let's try Cardan's method. Will he also say, I got July 31st, 2011 for Neptune conjunct midheaven. I click OK. I get Cardan's method. It confirms that at the top. July 2011. No, it's moved later. It's moved, 9 months, 9 months later into early 2012. So, does Brad Pitt have this disillusionment or idealism in summer 2011 or spring 2012? Does he have this romance and beauty come into his life? Was it, late 2009, or is it summer 2010? So, if one of them matches better, then we could have maybe guessed that method is working better. And let me right-click and try one more. Let's see what I get with this Nabod's method. These are people's names. Ptolemy, Cardan, Nabod. Is he going to get around March 2012? He is going to get, yes, early April. So almost the same. 2 or 3 weeks later. So Nabod and Cardan come out pretty close. Ptolemy is, I think, was 8 or 9 months earlier on these dates. So there you go. So the method changes the date that it happens. So according to different calculation methods, you get different dates. So the interesting thing is, people use this forecasting method, but they didn't completely agree about how to do it. So let's right-click again, and we could look at some of those settings and see what that does for us. And we'll play with this a little bit, and then I'll tell you what these primary directions are. Where the idea comes from and what it's based on. Well, let's go ahead and add conjunctions to intermediate cusps. I click OK, and now you see it's added more dates. It not only has, let me scroll down, and my list is longer, so I have to scroll. There's my Neptune midheaven in early April, according to this method. Which method is this again? This is Nabod. It tells me up here, Nabod. According to the Nabod method, early April. There's that Neptune conjunct midheaven, but now I've got all these additional things. The 8th, the 3rd, the 12th, all these other things going on. So I'm getting more information. Now, some astrologers may decide that to the intermediate cusps does not work, but to the angles it does, or maybe they all work. So there's, people can play around with this and work with it and see what they find out. I right-click, I go to Settings. Let's throw in planets conjunct planets. I've got two choices. I'll use Placidian arcs. Regiomontanus came up with a slightly different calculation, and then William Lilly agreed with Regiomontanus. But then there's the other method that was used by a lot of astrologers. We'll just use that, Placidian, for no particular reason. And now I've also got planet-to-planet relationships. And I have more and more dates, more and more details. So depending on the astrologer, they may believe that these also work. Or you may think only the main ones work. But it's up to you. You've got all this information to check it out. So in 2013, I've got Uranus on the 8th house cusp in late May. 2014, Jupiter conjunct Mars. So that would be some big expansion or achievement or something. Saturn conjunct Sun in 2016. Is there going to be some obstacle in his life? So these things could all be tested and checked out. The nice thing is we can just right-click, try a different system. We can go to Settings. Let's add in all these called Ptolemaic aspects, opposition, squares, trines, sextiles. Also the parallel and contraparallel. Click OK, and now I get an even longer list. And I can scroll, now I've got to scroll quite a bit. And now I've got all these additional things. PAS with small p means contraparallel the ascendant. So I've got that, Uranus contraparallel the ascendant. Contraparallel to Saturn. So it's Uranus to Saturn. Contraparallel based on the ascendant to Saturn, because I got a PMSC as well. You can tell I don't use this very much. So we've got those different aspects going on. Parallels and contraparallels, and I've got all my trines and squares. And you can see there's a lot now. I've got April, I've got something, May, July, and so on. Square of Moon to Pluto. So this could all be looked at, and somebody may decide, yes, this works. Rumen Kolov's books, he does charts of some famous people and indicates that he tells you which methods he thinks works and how they work, and he claims that this stuff actually does tell you major events in the person's life. And some other astrologers would also agree with him. So there it is. That's primary directions. Now I'm going to right-click, look at my choices again. So what are these things? What are they? How is it calculated? Here's an interesting thing. Kepler, that's Johannes Kepler, that's the Kepler, has a method. Does that mean that Kepler was calculating primary directions? Was he doing astrology charts and predicting using this method and came up with his own way of calculating? Yes, he did. And you may or may not recognize this is almost an equally important name in mathematics, Cardan. This is Jerome Carden, is the anglicized way of saying it, or Cardano. There's different ways of saying both his first and last name. But this is Cardan. He's the fellow who was a genius in mathematics. He started discovering things like imaginary numbers. He didn't articulate imaginary numbers completely the way we do in modern mathematics, but way ahead of his time. Solved equations and problems that nobody solved before, recognized by mathematicians as one of the leading mathematicians in history, and he was doing astrology and wrote books about astrology and so on, and he did primary directions and came up with his idea of how to calculate. So, what do we know? We know that there's this thing called primary directions. For quite a while in modern times, people stopped using them for some reason. The reason being it requires a lot of calculation and technical calculation to figure them out, and when the computers came along and people like Rumen Kolov figured out how to calculate these things and documented it, and then people like me and the other programmers of Cosmic Patterns can go in and program this and make it available. So it's pretty exciting. These ideas that brilliant people worked on and many astrologers are now available. With a few clicks, you've got it. You can try it out, see if it works. Things that would take days or weeks to calculate right there for you. Now, so what is this thing? What is a primary direction? And why are all these different methods? Well, there's different ways of looking at it. And that's why you come up with the different ideas. But you know what it's all based around? And this comes up in the modern prediction methods called secondary progressions as well, is a lot of what it boils down to is this. I'm going to cancel. I'm going to pull up a chart wheel. We're looking at Brad Pitt, so here's his chart wheel. You know what it comes down to? Is that, let's look at the 10th house cusp. It's right here, this thicker line. And the 4th house cusp. Now, how many degrees is it from the 4th house cusp to Jupiter? It's about 4 plus 9. I think it's about 13 degrees if I've added that correctly. And you know what? I noticed this when I was doing astrology consultations way back in the 70s. I'll tell you a little story. I once did a chart of a lady, and she didn't know her exact time. This is a true story. It's really unbelievable. And she said she would write to try to get her birth time, but she was really anxious and had a lot of problems. So I said, I'll try to look at your chart a little bit. And she said she thought she was born at a certain time of day. I don't remember what she said now, so many years ago. Something like the afternoon. And I noticed she had Saturn up near the top of her chart. And there's this idea by progression, by primary directions and secondary progressions, that 1 degree is about a year of life. So I said, did you have anything happen to your father or a death when you were a child or even as an early adult? And she said at a certain age, I don't remember, let's say it was 10 years old, her father died. And by the way, her father happened to be old because he was relatively old when she was born. So I said, well, what if Saturn was that many number of degrees from the midheaven? If it happened when she's 10 years old, somehow 1 degree equals a year of life. Well, I wouldn't be telling this story if it wasn't amazing. But sometime later, she got her birth certificate, and I had guessed that I said, well, maybe you were born at this time. She was, with the midheaven 10 degrees, if it was 10 years old. I don't remember the exact numbers now. But if it was 10 years old, it was 10 degrees. She was born. I had actually given her a possibility of a time that was within a few minutes, at which point she decided that I was, some kind of Merlin wizard, and I could figure out times and everything else, even though actually I wasn't totally convinced of it. But these things get exaggerated. But the amazing thing is that I made that guess and it happened to be true. And then, if you're an astrologer, you're familiar with these kinds of things. Somehow, especially to the midheaven and 4th house cusp, is what I've noticed, more than the ascendant descendant, you get this thing where that number of degrees later, that event happens. So Saturn midheaven, it happened for her, and it happens over and over again. The reason is, now the question is why? And you have this idea of solar arc directions, and the progressed sun moves 1 degree every year, and some people just say, well, a degree equals a year, it's just some mystical formula. It just is. Well, it seems to be, I've never read it exactly, but it seems the same observation is behind this, that what happens in primary directions is you end up again with about 1 degree equaling 1 year, roughly. And what's done in a lot of the primary directions is every 4 minutes after birth is a year of life. It's kind of a crazy idea, but somehow, through some mystical, magical thing, every 4 minutes after the child is born, that somehow gets stretched out over a year of life. It's as if you had some kind of internal biological clock, where as a year of life passes by, 4 minutes from your birth passes by, and the cusps move 1 degree every 4 minutes, so the chart is like evolving at a slower pace than life. In secondary progressions used in modern times, You have 1 day equals a year of life, and the house cusps move around 360 degrees plus a degree, and the sun moves a degree. Anyway, there's all this theory and observation about things moving 1 degree in a year. And if you move the chart 4 minutes, the cusps move about a degree. And that's basically what a primary direction is about every 4 minutes after birth, you live out a year of life. And then you end up with different definitions of what a day is, or what, what is it really 4 minutes, or is it 3 minutes 56 seconds, and why would it be 4 minutes, and should you adjust it, and should you measure that along the equatorial plane, and how do you do this, and some people already started relating it to the movement of the house cusps over a day, because you get that they move around the circle plus 1 degree. So you get all these different ways of looking at exactly how to make 1 degree equal a year of life. And it gets rather technical and into a lot of astronomy. And if you're interested in astrology, you don't need to know all that technical detail. You're applying the ideas, and you can just call up the primary directions, right-click, try the different methods, try the different things, and see if one of them works consistently. Read books by other people who do the research and see if it works. So it's a fascinating story, and I just thought I'd share that story with you, that there's this predictive method, supposedly can pick out these major dates. There are some different theories about how to calculate it. And in Sirius, we've got a fairly comprehensive ability to do these things. There's a lot of programming behind these few little clicks that you do, but with the help of Rumen Kolov's books and a lot of hard work, there it is, available to you. So an interesting little story for those of you interested in ancient methods or curious of what are primary directions. I keep hearing about them. That gives you some idea. Obviously, I could talk more about it. And each one of these areas of astrology goes on and on and on. So, for example, in the settings, there are more settings that we could add that we don't have. There's more options and more variations. But we've taken it to a pretty high level. We can take it further. It's just a matter of what our customers want and where they want us to focus our attention. And, astrology software, just like practicing astrology, does not tend to be a very lucrative area. I could have done other kinds of programming and be wealthy by now, but I'm doing what I love. And so we have very limited resources, and we just do the best we can. But we've really pushed the envelope further than almost everybody else in almost all these different areas of astrology. So there you have these things available. And the nice thing also is that even if you're not interested particularly in primary directions and ancient methods, what if you teach a class and somebody asks you about it, or they're curious about it? Even clients may know some astrology. Maybe they're mathematicians and they know about Cardan's work. You'd be surprised. And they say, well, I'm a mathematician, and Cardan did this thing called primary directions. Can you do that? Do you know anything about that? And it's nice to have these resources available, to you. So software like Sirius is just incredible because it makes all this stuff available to you. So that's just like one little fun part. I'm planning to make tutorials on all kinds of specialized subjects that different people are interested in, as well as the overall use of the program, which I only touched on in the first video, just to give you an idea of how amazingly elegant and fun it is to use Sirius. And you see this over and over again. Right-click, in this tutorial I keep having to drag things into the visible area. But when you're not giving a tutorial, it'll appear right there in the middle of your screen with no problem. You right-click, up pops the thing, you've got your settings, you've got your choices, you click OK. You can say, let me see, let me select the NABOD, let me go to the settings, let me get rid of all this so I can just see the basics. Okay, I've got it, okay. There they are, I've got, what did I leave? I left something selected there, doing that too fast. But you have the idea. You can just go in and select what you want, and you've got it. So, there you go. That's what primary directions are. That's how you can play with it, and you can see what happens. Oh, one last thing, and then I'll end this video. We're running into some semantic problems because this term primary directions has now gotten applied by some astrologers to an even more ancient method than the one used later in the Middle Ages. It goes all the way back to the Hellenistic time period, getting right in there around the year 0, going all the way back, in that range from say 200 BC to 300 or 400 AD. Very, very early time period of really developing astrological theory. A lot of that went on back then. There was another method, and if I go in here to forecast Hellenistic, it says zodiacal releasing, etc. There's something called, there's these even more ancient systems. One is called circumambulations. And circumambulations end up being a kind of a primary direction in a way, but the term got applied more specifically to the later forms of doing this calculation. But now some people are calling circumambulations primary direction. So it can get a little bit confusing. But the term primary directions usually applies to the later methods used by Kepler and Carden and Naboth and Regiomontanus and Lilly and so on. But there are all these even more ancient methods. These are sometimes called Time Lord systems. And with the circumambulations, if you watch this video in hopes of learning about that, that is also here. You click OK, and it will calculate the circumambulations, which is basically these planetary periods. And you also get times of aspects occurring and so on. Well, anyway, I wanted to tell you about primary directions, and there is another method. I'll right-click called Circumambulations, which is part of the Hellenistic Time Lords. And there's an option to include ingresses and also options on what planets to use, and there's also Hellenistic settings, and there's all these different settings. So you can see it's a very rich program with lots of choices, and my topic for today is primary directions, and circumambulations are sometimes referred to as primary directions. I'm going to click OK with the every degree selected. It's taking a little while to calculate it, and it will come up and give me a very detailed list of when these circumambulations, here's the sun changing each degree according to this theory. I'm not going to get into it, but I just want to mention that there are these other ancient methods, and one of them is sometimes called primary directions. More commonly, I think, called circumambulations. So, a little play there to open up some doors of some of the ancient things going on. This is a fantastic time in history that we're in right now, where we have access to all this information and make it available. So, specialized topic there for those of you who are interested, and I will end here. I'll do more specialized topics as well as general use issues of Sirius, how you get things done that you might want to do, and all the cool ways and you can do these things. Okay, thank you very much for listening. Have a beautiful day or evening or whatever you're doing. God bless you. Namaste, and I'll be making more videos soon.